Hello and welcome back again behind the bar of A Pint of Cthulhu. Today we have the creator of Abbadon the 13 Seals by Andy. Andy, would you like to say hello to everyone?
Hi, I'm Andy. I'm from Lost Haven Art is the other name that I usually go by.
Fair enough. Cap, if you'd like to kick us off with the first question.
Excellent. So, mate, you're in a bar, you walk up, order your drink, and you're ordering a pint of Cthulhu. What is that bartender putting in that pint?
A pint of Cthulhu. Probably a lot of rum. If it's a genuine alcohol question, a lot of rum.
It could be anything you want. It's just one of those throw out random questions we make up.
Being Scottish, I need to have some iron brew in there.
Rum and iron brew, come on, man. I suppose that's frightening enough. That'll be fucking good.
that would be eldritch horror in a glass.
Yeah.
I might have to try that now.
I used to actually mix iron brew with Morgan's. It is really sweet. Bizarre.
Yeah, but it'd be like drinking syrup.
It's basically like drinking alcoholic syrup, yeah.
That sounds horrifyingly bad.
Yeah, it's terrible. I wouldn't recommend it.
So, Andy, tell us a little bit to start off with about your game, what you're creating.
Abbadon is a dark fantasy game. It's inspired by video games like the Diablo series and Darkest Dungeon. So it takes place in the dark, grim world. There's demons rising from the depths. But what makes it a little bit different from other role-playing games is that you use a deck of playing cards instead of dice for all of the resolution mechanics.
Excellent. And we're talking like a proper, like, hearts, diamonds, or you got your own deck of playing cards?
Any deck of playing cards will work for it. There's 4 archetypes in the game, and each of them are associated with one of the suits, so they get bonuses and stuff like that if they're using cards from their own suit to do actions.
Excellent.
Reminds me a little bit about Malifaux, if you've ever played that before, the little miniatures game.
I've dabbled with Malifaux.
So, what kind of inspired you to start creating this game, anyway?
Playing card. I wanted to make a game of playing cards. I was on holiday. We had a deck of cards. I was playing around with them, and I just started to come up with some ways that you could probably use cards in place of dice for certain games. And then it just sort of spiraled from there. I like dark fantasy, so that seemed like a natural fit to build a game from. That's pretty much it.
Excellent. So just playing a bit of dark fantasy yourself, had a pack of playing cards one time and decided that, hey, these would go well together.
Yeah, I could mix these together. Yep.
Fantastic. Tell us a little bit about the story of Abbadon then.
So it's shamelessly rips off Diablo. So, in the world of Abbadon, there's a whole prophecy about the rising of the demon Abbadon. There's the demon of destruction. Certain things have started to happen in the world that co-align with the prophecy. And so players will expect to encounter unnatural, supernatural things starting to happen in the world that their characters should be able to deal with. I don't like to add too much story or fluff when I'm designing games or homebrew stuff, because I like the players and the GM to be able to sort of build off the basic building blocks.
Oh yeah, and don't tell us too much either, we don't want spoilers here.
But yeah, there's going to be multiple demon lords. The players will fight them as boss battles, boss fights at the end of like story arcs or chapters in the campaign. But the final fight will be against Abbadon, who's the big bad.
Alright, so it's just the build up to a boss fight?
Yeah, big build up to a boss fight. you can like I've been running a test game, so I've been including role-playing sections, just to make it feel a little bit more like you would run a campaign instead of just like sometimes when I play test things, I'll do like basic scenarios or like just flat out combat. But for the playtests that I've been doing over the last few months, I've been running it the same way that I would run a campaign. So I've been giving the players the opportunity to interact with NPCs and roleplay amongst each other. But most of the mechanics, like in a lot of role-playing games, are focused on combat.
Excellent. Yeah, well, that leads into the next one quite well, because we're going to ask you about characters and NPCs.
Okay.
So what would we expect from the sort of characters that you're designing?
Okay, so there are 4 archetypes, like I said. One of them is an elementalist. They're spellcaster. They use all 4 elements. Each archetype has a skill tree, or multiple skill trees. They've all got 4 skill trees. You can mix and match skills from those skill trees, so you can build your character any way that you really want within the archetype. So there's a lot of customization. So the elementalist uses things like fire magic, water and ice, air and electricity and earth magic to do stuff. There's the faithful, which kind of fits into your cleric paladin-y type character, where like they worship the gods of light. They can use light magic. They're really good warriors in combat. They've got a tree called martyrdom, where the more damage they take, the more badass that they become, essentially. That's the sort of frontline combat character archetype.
A handy skill for a tank, yeah.
Yep. There's the hexing, who are they're also spellcasters, but they use darker magic like necromancy and blood sorcery, curses. They can manipulate fate, so they've got an ability tree that's all about manipulating the deck of cards to be more in their favour. They're the only class that can really do that. And then the last one is the Stalker, who is like a mixture of like a ranger and assassin or rogue. So they use shadow magic. They're really good with ranged weapons. They can use traps. But they have a 4th set of skills, which is the lycanthropy tree, which is for melee combat, which allows them to bolster their strength, do more damage, heal like each round and stuff like that, which they kind of tap into an inner beast as a sort of theme behind that particular skill tree. So all the classes all have like what you'd maybe expect in a dark fantasy game. They kind of mix multiple archetypes from games like D&D and stuff like that together into like a more broader set of skills.
So it should be stuff that people will be familiar with if they're familiar with any other tabletop RPGs.
Yeah, or like video games and stuff like that as well. Like the Elementalist can throw fireballs and stuff like that around like you'd expect. But
can't be a good fireball.
Yeah, they've all got some flavour that sort of grounds them in that the dark fantasy sort of setting and aesthetic of the game.
Excellent.
So, talking about all these different archetypes, how have you gone about designing and like balancing each one compared to the other?
Through lots of playtesting. So I'm very much throw everything at the wall when I start designing a project. And see what sticks. And then, see what sticks. And I do it when I'm doing art projects as well, where I'll just kind of scribble stuff and see what looks good. But like for game design, I'll throw all my ideas down onto paper, then I'll get some friends or whatever together to start playtesting it, and then they'll tell me what's working for them, what isn't, and then I'll, like after every playtest session, so we playtest every 2 weeks on a Saturday. So I'll be doing a playtest after we do this interview. And I usually spend about an hour or something after we play and we chat, just kind of rewriting things or adding stuff in. So it's very much we're balancing as we go along, sort of deal. But initially I start with what sounds cool and then we see what actually works.
And the people that you're playing with at the moment and playtesting with, are those the people you're creating it with?
Well, they're very much just playtesting. The thing, I'm not going to say is solo, because I have brought in some help here and there. I've got a friend of mine, Derek, who's editing everything for me as we go along. And so I mostly do art stuff. I like to design games. I've been playing tabletop role-playing games for 23, 24 years at this point. And so I have a pretty solid grasp of like mechanics and stuff to work from. But when it comes to writing, not my strongest suit. And so I've brought in some help from some people to like maybe spice up some of the monster descriptions or reword some of the mechanics and stuff that I've written down so they read better. But about 90% of everything is solo.
Excellent. That kind of ties into what I was going to ask you next, and that was just in regards to the challenges that you've faced while bringing this all together. So you're saying stuff like getting people in to help with your monster designs, a bit of the writing and stuff like that as well.
Yeah.
Have you had much trouble, much reason for going back to the drawing board or rewrites, that kind of thing?
So when I first put the game together, I had combat sort of planned out like D&D, so it was all grid based, and you can move so many squares or whatever and around and that sort of thing. And then when I started playtesting, some of the playtesters who I've been gaming with for a long time went, "You don't normally run games with battle maps and grids, so why?" And I kind of went back to the drawing board and redesigned combat to be a lot more theatre of the mind friendly. There are positions that you can choose a character to be in each round in combat, but it's not quite the moving individual squares, measuring everything out sort of tactical combat that you might get in like Pathfinder or D&D or some other games like Lancer and things like that. The inspiration for that kind of came from the One Ring role-playing game, which is a favourite of mine. And it was something that initially was bothering me because combat takes forever, and while combat is a focus of the game, I like combat and role-playing games to be quite fast. And so changing from an intricate grid-based combat system to something a little bit more narrative and free-flowing definitely speeds it up, and it definitely feels better to me as a GM, but it might not be everybody's cup of tea.
So you're saying about how you've been playtesting and tweaking things as it goes. When you playtest, what exactly do you look for during the gameplay? I mean, how has it affected development? I mean, you've said you've changed it from a basic grid-based system to what you've got now, but what other kind of things do you look for when you are playtesting?
So I look for, in terms of like some of the abilities and things that the characters can do, if I feel that they either slow things down, or they don't quite work as intended, or the players don't feel that they work as intended, or don't feel that they contribute much to how the character plays, then I've been pretty ruthless for either changing them entirely or cutting them completely from the game. During the week, I redid all of my skill trees for every archetype, and at least 2 or 3 skills from every skill tree got completely wiped from the game. because
Oh wow.
they weren't adding anything to combat, and they didn't feel special enough to either me or the players to really bother including them. So yeah, things like that. I do the same thing with like monsters, or there's mechanics for randomly pulling together a dungeon using the deck of cards if you're the GM. And so yeah, I've been looking for things like that maybe slow things down or could be tweaked a little bit to feel better for the player or the GM. So it's all about keeping the game fast paced, because this is inspired by the Diablo games and Darkest Dungeon, where the action kind of needs to keep going forward.
It's been a while since I've played a Diablo game, but I remember them being awful fast paced.
Yeah, Diablo games
I've ever played one.
games are fast paced. So I want the game to kind of reflect that, with like combat should be quick. Nothing should really slow the players or the GM down too much, unless you get a total party kill like I did the last playtest. But like, yeah, it's keeping it feeling like the action is going forward, and so anything that doesn't really add to that or doesn't help with that are things that I'm kind of looking to trim off.
So, what kind of thing have you found, like, I mean, you've said about the challenging of the writing, but what kind of thing have you found, like, that's rewarding with what you've been doing so far? What's been keeping you going on this?
So, yeah, a few things. So when playtesting, when you GM a game, and sometimes you kind of come away from the table and you and the players are just like, that was like one of the best sessions or whatever we've ever had of a game. Like, everybody feels that it was a good time. So when that happens during a playtest, that obviously encourages me to keep going with it. People seem to be enjoying it. I've let a few people who aren't part of the playtest see the sort of work in progress document for the game. And from the feedback that they've gave me, they really want to try the game out because it's a bit different, which is encouraging. Said mostly an artist, so I spend a lot of time working on the visual sort of side of stuff, which seems to attract a lot of people.
Your Twitch streams, for one. I've managed to catch one of them. Your artwork is incredible.
So yeah, having people appreciate the art, appreciate the actual gameplay, appreciate what's there in theory on paper. Just like, I like having that input from other people, and that kind of keeps me going with stuff. I've tried to work in projects before where trying to get people to engage with it hasn't really worked, and it just kind of kills the motivation. Because obviously if you're making a tabletop role-playing game, you're making it for other people to play. So if no one feels interested in it, then it sort of kills the mood. So the fact that I've had quite a few people being interested in the game, this is the third interview that I've actually done about Abbadon at this point. All of that sort of stuff, the idea that people seem to genuinely be interested in what's there is enough to kind of keep me going with it.
Oh, well, speaking of that, making the stories, keeping people interested, that kind of thing, what would you say you would recommend for resources and that? Like, for example, if you were talking to someone like myself, just trying to put together a story for his friends, is there anything that you would say that you use that you would find useful?
Like for GMing in general,
just for GMing, but for just putting together the story.
Say, like, when it comes to GMing, I tend to play pretty loose. So I really feel that over planning things can take all the fun out of it, not just for you but for everybody. So you kind of have to be aware of who your audience is. So if you're playing with a group of, if you're designing a campaign or whatever for a group of friends, you have to really think about what kind of players they are, what they like in a game, and don't I tend to start things with like a basic starting point, some things in the middle that I can throw in at any point. They don't have a set place in the timeline or anything like that, and roughly how I plan on finishing things at the end. And then I just kind of, I'm very flexible with going with the flow, going with what feels right at the time.
Aye, so no planning, play it by ear. I get you.
Yep, pretty much. Like I was doing an actual play for about a year over on a friend's Twitch channel for Legends of the Five Rings, and my friend, he runs like multiple D&D sessions and things like that on his channel. Spends hours every week planning them, and I sent him my notes one time for the Legends of the Five Rings campaign. It was literally like 3 sentences. And he was
I think for me, I'd probably be more on your friends page there when I'm putting together stuff, stories, maps, battle maps, all that sort of stuff. I'm thinking of everyone and everyone involved and where they're going to be. Definitely, I'm in the over-planning stage.
Over-planning. And, like, if that works for you and you enjoy it, that's, like, there's no wrong way, I think, of doing it. Well, there probably is wrong ways of doing it, but I don't necessarily think over-planning is wrong. It's just you need to, like you said, you're considering everybody involved. As long as you're doing that, I think you're good.
Oh, I know, willingness to be flexible, definitely, if you...
And yeah, don't get
the amount of times we derailed stories.
But like, I could say the same for like designing a game. Like the ideas that you might have at the start will definitely change. When you get to like play testing and things like that, things will come up that you suddenly go, "Oh, that mechanic that I thought was really fun, everybody else hates it. I'm gonna get rid of it." And yeah, you kind of have to like be willing to go with that, take the criticism if there is any, reflect on your own sort of working. I think
take the criticism. I'm not taking any criticism. What's that?
Oh, you'll get it anyway, Cap. You know you will.
You get used to it after a while.
You were saying about the Lord of the Rings game you're playing. What other like tabletops have you played? And I mean, do you have a favourite?
I've played a lot of tabletop role-playing games. I'll give you a top 3. That's probably easier than a single favourite. So The One Ring is one of my favourite role-playing games. I'm a big Tolkien fan. The One Ring does a really, really good job of capturing the feeling of like the Lord of the Rings or the Hobbit books. And the mechanics are really straightforward. As I said, like it took inspiration with combat, where there's 4 different positions in combat in the One Ring, and the players are kind of encouraged to move around during combat to get access to different abilities and things like that. So for that one, it's a mixture of, it does a really good job of delivering on the setting that it's supposed to do, and the mechanics are really nice to work with. Another favourite game of mine is a Japanese role-playing game called Ryutama. And there's big emphasis in Ryutama about it's all about the journey that the characters are taking. So combat, again, really simplified, but there's a collaborative storytelling element where the players kind of pre-plan their journey with the storyteller or GM, and they can like decide on like they're heading to a new town, so they can decide elements of what that town might have, what it might be called, the sort of people that they might encounter there. And then as a GM, you're kind of using that information to build the journey in between with stuff that the players seem like they're interested in based on how they've answered the questions about where it is their characters are actually wanting to end up. Third favourite game is probably the Fantasy Age. It was the Dragon Age system. It's a little bit closer to like D&D or Pathfinder, but it uses 3d6 for dice rolling, and it has a stunt mechanic. So when you do actions in combat, cast spells and other stuff like that, one of the dice is called your stunt dice. Whatever number that dice is sort of landed on, it gives you stunt points, which lets you do extra things in combat, like you can empower spells, or like knock your opponent down, or push them back, or make a second attack, and things like that.
Nice. That's Dragon Age, you say?
Yeah, or Fantasy Age, the second edition for that just came out recently. I've not picked that up yet, but...
Well, I'm a big fan of those video games. I might be looking that one up.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, I totally understand the way
researching the One Ring.
Yeah, the different dice system really interests me as well, because I've currently been trying to put together a Fallout campaign.
Spoilers?
Well, it depends on when you release this.
Good point.
So I've been trying to put together a Fallout one, and it uses the 2D20 version of the dice mechanics, and putting that together it's been interesting to look into. Speaking of which, I want to get back to your game a second with the playing cards. I'd quite like to get a better idea what you're doing there. So can you give us sort of an example in regards to what would happen in combat? How you would use a playing card?
Okay. Yeah, so there's a few things to take into consideration in combat. So like the standard amount of cards that players will get given if they're unskilled in anything is 2. When it comes to basic attacks, your weapon is actually what determines a lot of things. And weapons have an accuracy rating. For every plus in the accuracy rating that they have, it will give the player an extra card to draw. And in general, the target number you're trying to look to make is a 13, which is actually where the 13 seals part of the game title comes from. So if you can make say a character had a sword or something like that with +2 accuracy on it, they would get 4 cards for combat, or for making their attack with that weapon. I've just drawn 4 cards here, so I have a 5, an ace, a 6, and a 7. So 6 and a 7 makes a 13. So the player could play those. That would be a success. In this case, both of the cards are a club. So if you were the Stalker archetype, their associated suit is a club. So their attack would actually do a little bit more damage, because both cards I've used to make the 13 are clubs. But say, for example, the other 2 cards weren't a 5 and an ace. Say one of those was a king. So I could play the 6 and 7, that's 1 attack. I could play the king, which is a 13, and I could do a second attack. So the cards that you get given, you can make multiple actions if you're able to. And there's other factors, so like when it comes to the skills or abilities, they go in ranks from 1 to 5. So the rank gives you extra cards. But it also lets you adjust that target number. So if you've got rank 1 in a skill, instead of looking for just a 13, you'd be looking for a 12, 13, or a 14. And if you had 3 ranks in it, then you'd be looking for a 10 all the way up to 16, which gives you a much bigger range, makes you more likely to hit. Also, potentially allows you to take more than 1 action in combat.
All right, so you're talking. Any action that's taken, the difficulty is set, and that depends on what the action is. the amount of cards you draw determine what the success is, depending on the numbers that are on the cards. Yep. And the amount of cards that you draw is dependent on your both skill and rank.
Yeah.
Excellent.
That sounds like a very good system. It's going to be interesting.
There's multiple degrees of success, so like as I said, you can make the target number with any card that you've got in your hand, and that would be a regular success. If it's if the cards that you're playing for that action all match your archetype suit, has a higher degree of success, so more damage, longer effect, whatever. If all the cards match your suit and one of them happens to be a face card, so a jack, queen, or a king, then they also have additional effects over and above. And as I said, you can combo, so if you've got 5 cards in your hand and your target number is like 11 to like 15, for example, and you can make those numbers 3 times of the cards that are in your hand, then you can make 3 actions during your turn in combat. The other side of that, so the GM in Abbadon doesn't really draw cards at any point. Monsters work very differently. Monsters have certain abilities that they can do, and it's up to the player characters to avoid them. So player characters get a number of reactions each round, again based off equipment or some of their abilities. And again, that works the same way. They get a certain amount of cards anytime that they're forced to react to a monster.
And that's just any turn that they take. It'll be like sort of they'll have a certain amount of minor actions and a certain amount of like combat actions that they can use.
Yeah, monsters. Yeah. So,
is there a way a player could run out of cards?
It's a single deck. We're going to be playing with every player having their own deck. But essentially, once all the cards in the deck are done, the GM should just reshuffle the deck and keep going. We never actually reached the point in any playtests where we've ran out of all the cards in the deck, but I imagine higher experience levels, when characters are maybe drawing. So at the moment, most of the characters are drawing, I think, 4 cards, 5 maybe, I think was the highest that anybody drew for a single action so far. But I think at higher levels, when every character is maybe drawing that every action or of every round, then yeah, you're going to burn through the cards pretty quickly and the deck will have to get reshuffled. But it's easy enough to do. Like, once they've played the cards, they go into a discard pile. Any cards that don't get used or can't be used, they get put in the discard pile. So at the end of a round, or whenever the cards run out, the GM should be able to just take the discard pile, reshuffle it, and dish out the cards to the players again if combat hasn't been resolved yet. And the card deck gets reshuffled at the end of every round of combat anyway.
How long is your game like run for? If you're playing an individual session, because you were saying you haven't yet had anyone go through the entire deck, what would be the average time of a game?
So when we've been playtesting, we'd normally start about 7:30, 8 o'clock, and we play until about 11. So
oh wow,
so 3.5 hours per session, which I think now is about the average for a role-playing session. I remember when I was like a teenager and it used to be about 8 hours of gaming. But
back before responsibilities,
yeah, back before being an adult. But yeah, about 3 or 4 hours I would recommend per session. And a campaign is maybe going to take you, I don't know, we've had like 6 or 7 sessions at this point, and I've only just threw the first boss encounter at them. But you probably speed that up a little bit. Probably have like 5 or 6 sessions before getting to a boss fight, and then you're probably going to have 4 or 5 bosses in a campaign. So fairly think that ends up being pretty short for a tabletop game. And you do have that final, like a lot of tabletop games can go for loads of sessions.
D&D.
Yeah, but I think if you've got that final boss to deal with, and the game will get progressively harder, there's a definite end point.
Alright, excellent. So, now that we know what your game is, how you play it, all that sort of stuff, and the fact that you're going to be going back to the drawing board for all your boss fights now, what can we expect from you in the future?
So I'm planning on doing a Kickstarter for Abbadon in September, and before then I'm going to be at 2 conventions in the UK. The UK Games Expo at the start of June, so about 4 weeks. I won't be running Abbadon at that. I'm just going to be there flogging artwork and other stuff. But Tabletop Scotland is at the end of August. And on the Friday night at Tabletop Scotland, they are having role-playing game sessions, and I've been given one of the slots to run my game for a group of randoms.
Excellent. Whereabouts in Scotland is that?
Yeah.
Perth.
In Perth?
Yep.
I was going to say, Cap, get in there, you're up in Scotland.
Yes, Scotland's bigger than you think, mate.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot. I think it's a 2.5 hour drive for me to get to Perth.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, Friday night, Tabletop Scotland, role-playing game sessions. There's going to be other role-playing game sessions over the weekend, but like, none of the vendors and stuff are going to be there and are going to be working on the Friday. So it's the only time that I'll be able to actually run a game. The rest of the weekend I'll be at my table selling art prints and trying to flog Abbadon to people because it's the weekend before the Kickstarter starts. For other things, if this goes well, a lot of my inspiration for games to design come from video games. So I'm a big fan of like the Final Fantasy games, like JRPG games.
A man of culture.
Yep. So I started working on a game inspired by like Final Fantasy and like Chrono Trigger and all that sort of stuff, which was supposed to Abbadon was supposed to be a quick, rose-light, easy game for me to pull together, and then it evolved. So I've sidelined that project for longer than I'd planned to. But if Abbadon goes well, then I'll hopefully be doing playtest and then a Kickstarter for that other game project down the line as well.
Well, you've mentioned the Kickstarter. What kind of goals are you looking to have?
Stretch goals. Let me bring up the Kickstarter page because I can't remember off the top of my head. I did pull together some stretch goal stuff. The rewards that I've got are what you'd kind of expect. There'll be early bird ones for the PDF copies and the physical book, which are a little bit of a discount compared to the not early bird prices. And there is going to be a sort of collector's tier.
Okay.
So I've gave all my my tiers like fitting names. So like the early bird PDF only is called the Eager Initiative, and then the regular PDF is the Initiate. And then there's like the Fanatic Cultist, which is the early bird hard copy tier, and Cultist is just the regular one. But there's the Cult Magister tier, which comes with the hard copy of the book, the PDF of the book, the card deck, which I've designed a custom card deck for the game. You can play with any playing card deck, but I've made one that kind of fits the theme of the game, has similar artwork and all that sort of stuff.
So we've seen a little bit of that, and it does look amazing.
That will also include all of the digital and physical stretch goals and a set of metal pin badges, which are pin badges that kind of reflect the 4 sets of the card deck, essentially. For stretch goals, the first stretch goal that I've got here is going to be a digital and physical copy of the world map for the game. So it'll be an extra, like a poster size. If it's a physical one, that'll come with the book and stuff like that. Probably I had the idea of designing some extra monsters and doing extra monster art for stretch goals. Making the book a bit prettier and fancier is also in there, so adding like the silk ribbon and reinforced stitching and stuff like that into the spine of the book. Doing an SRD for the system with 4 more generic sort of skill trees was going to be in there. Doing art prints of like the archetype monster art, and then again a dust jacket for the book, so again making the physical book a little bit prettier.
With the PDFs and stuff, are you planning any sort of compatibility with the online versions of like tabletop generators, that sort of stuff, Roll20, to let people play with, remotely with people?
The Roll20 is probably the easiest virtual tabletop to do, because Roll20 actually has decent playing card features in it already. I've been test playing remotely using Foundry, but it requires about 20 different mods to use playing cards and stuff with Foundry. But yeah, I'll probably look into Roll20 for an official sort of virtual release.
Nice one. Yeah, we play with a couple of Americans, so that's always useful for us.
Because
I was going to say, when you do Roll20, hit me up. Definitely.
I set up Roll20 to do test plays on for it.
Ooh.
Mostly so I could include my own custom deck of cards. But yeah, some people recommended some higher stretch goals if it goes a little bit further than that, like a nicer box for the card deck and stuff like that.
I did that one.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a few things there. None of them are hugely time-consuming ones, I don't think. Because the world map, there'll probably be a version of it in the book anyway. That stretch goal was just to have that poster size print out one. It's a little bit nicer.
Nice bit of artwork.
Yeah. And it's art that should already be done. The extra monsters and extra monster art, that'll be a little bit of extra work, but not huge. Things like spicing the book up, making it pretty, are all just extras that the manufacturer for the prints deals with and shouldn't really add too much extra time. And again, like the art prints and stuff, it's art that should already be in the book, so it's just an extra thing to get printed. It's not really an extra thing to take up time.
Fine.
So I'm kind of hoping to have the physical stuff all kind of sent out to backers and stuff if the Kickstarter are successful by about March, April next year.
That's quite a quick turnaround. Well, it's getting kind of it's getting late into things, so I think we'll start wrapping it up here. The last thing we're going to ask you is, where can people find you? What socials are you on? What tags do you go by? And any closing statement?
I am pretty much on all the main social media sites, so Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Although
All under Lost Haven.
all under Lost Haven art. And Twitch as well, Lost Haven art. And yeah, normally I'm quite happy to chat to people if they message me or comment or whatever on stuff. Closing statements. I'm really bad at doing these, so I'm not really sure.
Find me on socials is fine, don't worry.
Other than thanking you guys for taking the time out on a Saturday to
No, thank you for joining us.
Hear me ramble about the game that I'm designing. That's always fun. But yeah, I appreciate being asked to do it. I know you were interested in maybe doing a playtest at some point, and I'm happy to do that.
Definitely.
Because I'm trying to pull together a one-shot adventure, obviously for running at Tabletop Scotland, so it'll be nice to kind of test play that with a few different groups beforehand.
We'll definitely be your guinea pig any day.
Sounds good. But yeah, thanks for.
And that has been our interview with Andy.